Hi, my name is Jan Daars from Intersky Integrations BV, where I work as an integration architect, helping companies set up the integration landscape using both Azure Integration Services and Boomi middleware. Over the years, I've noticed that there's a lack of technical knowledge available about hybrid integration scenarios. You have a lot of people who are either specialized in Azure or either specialized in Boomi, but actually combining the two environments to make a successful integration solution is quite rare. And I hope that this series will help people setting up a proper environment and that there in the end is a lot of extra knowledge available on the World Wide Web. So let's get started. Okay, on this first episode we will start quite easy. So the goal of this episode is to deploy a container app within Azure. So we have a containerized version of our Boomi instance, and we are going to deploy it using Bicep from Azure Verrified Modules, so the modules which are verified by Azure, and we are going to deploy it from our local machine. And hopefully that works nice. My goal is to build it from the scratch, and we'll see what happens. First things first. Maybe a small introduction about Azure Verified Modules. Azure Verified Modules are, in a sense, Bicep or Terraform or RM templates, which are controlled by Azure. They put in the most basic choices. According to their best practices, they create the modules for that. So it's really handy to use these. It also develops a lot faster than compared to when you have to deploy all of the modules within your infra as code yourself, so it's quite nice. We are going to deploy an Atom, and as you see we are now in the Docker Hub, and this is quite important. This is the path to the Atom release of the container of Boomi. I recommend you to go to this and have a small read, but as you see we need quite some variables, but some more on that later. And as you see we are now in the Atom, but Boomi also have a release for the molecules, so when you need a higher availability with more instances, which is really good doable on a container instance, you can go to their molecule page and we can see the various tags over here. I will make a separate episode on how you should update your molecules or your Atom images, but this episode I will try to keep everything quite simple. I have here an Azure subscription in development. As you see there's nothing there yet, but in the end of the episode there should be a nice container instance running with our Atom on top of it. What I also recommend you to do is go to my GitHub repo and download my Postman collection here and also my Postman environment, because throughout the series we are going to use Postman to connect to the Boomi Atmosphere API to get, for example, a token to install the Atom or see what environments are available, and in the future we'll do a lot of different things with that API. So I recommend you to follow along. I will now open Postman, and I assume that you have now imported both the environment and the collection. As you see, I already put various variables over here, but you have to set the account ID yourself. You have to set your username over here, so you have to put your email address down here. You have to leave Boomi token as is. And you have to create a user API token. And I will show you really quick within Boomi how you can actually do that. So we are now in Boomi. We go to our account information settings. And over here you have Atmosphere API tokens. And you just create a new token. You copy that one and you place it into your password over here. And that's it for that part. And for the rest, you have to import the collection I shared within the GitHub. I post a link down in the description, and we will use these two calls today. So that's that. I now go to my Boomi Atom environment. As you see, I don't have a lot of interesting stuff over here, but in our Atom management, you will see that I have two environments, development and production. You have to copy your environment ID, but what I want to show you is that we can actually use now our Postman collection to get all environments. So I just have to press send because I already selected my environment over here. And as you see, I have two environments, test and production. I have to copy this ID for later. And we will also need a installer token for our Atom. So we can do that also like this. So we now have an install token also. And of course you can do this from the portal of Boomi, but I recommend using APIs. Because when we are going into the next episodes, we will use these same APIs to automate the CICD process of implementing a Boomi environment. Okay, so now I go to my Visual Studio Code. Okay, let's get starting with the actually implementation. First things first, we are going to create our main.bicep file, and this will contain our infra as code. And next to that, we also need a file for our parameters. Not in this episode, but in the next episode, I want to be able to release to various environments. And it is handy to have for each environment its own parameter file. So we have our main.parameters.dev.json, and that will contain all of our JSON parameters. So in our Bicep file, we have to determine a scope for our Bicep implementation. It can be either on management level, on subscription level, or on resource group level. And the choice there has quite an impact on how you define the scopes on your defined resources. So something to keep in mind, as you see over here. So we go for our subscription. And the next thing what we actually need is to set up our resource group. And that resource group in Azure is actually going to contain our resources. For the resource, we are not going to use Azure Verrified Module because we don't want to have a module because it's quite hard to use it in a scope in Bicep. Microsoft.resources/resource groups, and we are going to go for the latest version. And what we need for it, as always, we will need a name. And I want to use a parameter for this. So what I want to create is a parameter named resource group name. And let's do it on top of here. Param RG name, and it's a string. So now we have our name, but we also need to define a location where the resource group is deployed in. So let's do this. And also for that same example, we also define a parameter with location and also make it a string. Once you start using Bicep, it's really handy to use parameters. It makes your life a lot easier, and also for other developers, it's easier to read the parameters from a parameter file compared to dive into all of your Bicep templates or your implementation. This will be quite an easy one, but once it gets more complex, you want to have centralized parameters. So that's what we are going to define now. Okay, I have a small implementation over here, so you can get this from the Bicep documentation. And the first thing which we want to define is our RG name and the value of it will be our Boomi VM demo dev user group. And the next thing we need is our location. And we do the same thing again. Our value, and because I am located in the Netherlands, we go for REST URL. We save this, and we go back to our main Bicep. You see the errors are gone, and it works quite nice. Maybe good to mention it's nice to use the Biceps extension, so you get that error type of resolution. Okay, now we have our resource group. The next thing we want, we go back to our template over here. So we have our resource group, and we want to put our resource into a VNet because it's more safe, but also because we are going to connect our container app over NFS with a storage account. We need to have a VNet on top of it, otherwise it's not possible. One thing to mention is that VNet integration on a container app instance is currently in preview. So it's something to consider if you want to put this into a production environment. That's that. So now we are going to call a module, and we're going to call it virtual network. And now the nice thing about Azure Verrified Modules comes in. We see here we are public. So we actually are going to call a public repository. And in this case, it's Azure Verrified Modules. And we will go for the networking part. Network, virtual network, virtual network. And we have to select the version. I go for the latest one. And as you see, we have some options over here. But what is more handy is that you can go to the public repository from here. So if you hover over the name of your module, you see here documentation. So let's go there. And as you see, on my browser, we went to the repository of the Azure Verrified Modules, in this case for the virtual networks. And what is handy is that you have usage examples over here. So, for example, you have here both a Bicep implementation, a JSON parameter file, and a Bicep parameter file. So you can see here. And we can actually copy that, place it into our implementation. So as you see, we now retrieve a lot of different information about that specific module. Let's select the version again. And we actually don't need that much, but I want to have a parameter for the VNet name, because we will need it a bit later also. So param VNet name string, and I'm actually going to remove most of our parameters because most of it we don't actually need. And because we are calling we are scoped into our subscription, we actually need to set our scope for this module to the resource group because we want this virtual network to be coded into that resource group. And in our parameters, we need quite some things. We first need our address prefixes, and it's an array. And in that array we need to define our IPs, which we need. You can search Azure for on how you could choose those IPs, and you need to check the availability of the IPs which you have available. So in this example I go for 10.0.0.022, and I'm going to copy this one. So IPs can change. And the next thing, I want to have a name for my VNet. And we are going to use that same parameter VNet name. And next location, because the VNet also needs a location. And our subnets, because later we will need subnets both for our container app and for the storage accounts. It also needs a name, and I decided that I also want to have a parameter for it, container app subnet name and now our error is gone. So first we need it for our container app, and then of course we also need it for our storage account. Account subnet name. And we can of course not be on the same IP. Let's change that. And that's it. We will have our virtual network available and our subnets. That's quite nice. If you're wondering what's actually happening within that module, what you actually can also do, you can press over here the version, and you actually, your VS Code actually opens a file with the main bicep from the AVM module. And this complete module is maintained by Azure. So that's really nice. So the next thing we need is a storage account. So we again are going to call a module, and we call it storage account. Going back to the drawings, we created our VNet now. Now we need our storage account. Storage account, and again we go for our AVM module. We are public AVM resource storage account, and we go for the latest version. And because I don't need that much, I go for the name here, and we call it storage account name. I will stop updating the main parameters file in this demo. I will update them later, but you can update them yourself. It's really easy. You just have to add my. That's to make it a bit faster. I will do it like this right now. Our scope is again the resource group, and we need to set parameters for the module. And first things first, we are going to give it a name. Storage account name. Be aware that this has to be a unique name and it has a maximum, I think, about 23 characters. So we have that. And because we are going to connect over NFS, we need to set up a file share and allocate a certain amount of storage to it. So first things first, so we say file services. And in that file services, we set up a share. And in that share, what we actually have to set up there is that we want to enable the NFS protocol. Protocols. And we have to give it a name. Let's give it an easy name, NFS storage Boomi. So now we got our file share created. And we need to have a kind of it, and we say it is in this case it is a file storage. As you see, you have some options here, and it's nice that Bicep actually provides the options from the template from us, but this option is actually maintained in the AVM module, so it's really nice if you use AVM. And our location is of course the location, and then what's next is the SKU name, and our SKU name is in this case standard RS, but of course for your scenario decide it for yourself what you need. I tested before with premium, so maybe it's safer for the demo to go with premium. And we want to set up manage identities because I will probably use this in a later stage. In another episode. And because we are going to connect within the VNet, for NFS we actually also need a private endpoint. So I'm going to set it up right now. And our service is a file service. And we also need to have a subnet resource ID. And to construct a subnet resource ID, it is not that easy. You actually have to know what you are doing. So I already prepared this part. So that's for our storage account, and this is for our container updater. So what we actually do is we link in this sense our container and our storage account subnets to each other so they can connect with each other. So we have now this parameter and we connect it like this. And as you see, we have an error over here, so we need a subscription ID. So that's our next parameter. And now we don't have any errors anymore. And now you also see the use case of why we are using those parameters. So we only have to set everything up once. And one handy other thing is that we want to add a depends on the VNet. So our storage account is not created before the virtual network is fully created. And now we are going to set up a log analytic workspace. So going back to our Raw, and this is to collect our logs for our monitoring part of our container app instance. So again, module, log analytics. workspace. Again, we go for the Bicep, so AVM, resource, operational, insights, workspace it should be. There we go. And we go for version 0.9.1. And the name will be a new parameter. It will be the log analytics workspace name. And that's our next parameter. Then we need to define our scope again, our resource group, and our params. Now our name is again the log analytics workspace name. Our location is our location parameter. And also this deployment, we don't want to do it before we actually have our other resources, so we want to have a depends on for the virtual network. There we go. And what we have to set up, we have a container app layer, but that container app is running on a container environment. So we first have to set up the environment and then we can add the container to it. And what you can consider is actually setting up that container environment separately from your container app. So you can also use that same environment for other apps outside of your middleware or even within your middleware. So we will set up that right now. So we go for module, we say manage environment, your public, AVM, resource, app, and we say managed environment. We go for the latest version. And again, we have a new parameter. We say managed environment name. There we go. Our scope is again our resource group and our params. Are the following. So we first have to say our log analytics workspace resource ID. And now we go to our output of our log analytic workspace. Say outputs.resource ID. If you ever wonder what type of parameters are possible, you can always go to the documentation as you showed you, but you can also go over here and you can actually see what parameters are defined here. So the options we sometimes get, they're also defined down here. That's quite handy. That's our log analytics. We need a name, and again we go again for our managed environment name. We need to set up a bridge here IDR, and that is in this case nice IP of 172.16.0.1, and we go for the 28. And we have our infrastructure resource group name which we need, so you can define where the managed environment is going to be placed. Infrastructure resource group name, and we're just going to put it into our resource group of the scope. What you have to know is that when we are going to deploy a managed environment, a separate resource group is also created. So how we actually are going to maintain that is going to be a separate episode. Infrastructure resource group name, and we also need our subnet to connect our managed environment to. And that's where I can the container app subnet, which already comes in, so we can actually set up the managed environment with our subnet of our container app. If you want to set up a VNet related managed environment, you need to set up the VNet when you are creating it. You cannot do it afterwards. That's something to know. And we are now going to set that it is internal, so it's not exposed to the internet. And our location. And that we also want to reserve a certain CIDR and a IP. We are not going to make it so redundant because it's a demo. And we are now going to connect our storage over NFS with our container app. So we have the storages. We are now going to mount it to our managed environment. Kind is NFS. So you can also connect it with SMB, but I chose NFS. We are going to set our storage account name and our access mode. And it will be read-write because we also want the Boomi Atom in this case be able to write to the storage account. And we have to provide a share name. We call it NFS storage Boomi. There we go. And now our managed environment is done. And the last thing we need to set up is the container app itself. So this will be the Atom actually. So we are going to need the environment variables which are set in Docker. So when we go again over here, we are going to set a certain tag. So I would always recommend to use a release tag, and Boomi promotes one for Red Hat, and also the regular one, so the molecule release. It's an Alpine version of the release. The only big difference is for the Red Hat, it works better if you have a SAP implementation. So if you have SAP, use the Red Hat. Otherwise, it doesn't matter. And I like the open source idea of Alpine. So let's continue. So the next thing is our container app. So we are going to build a module and we name it container app. You can go for AVM, resource app, container app, and we go in this case for the latest version. So it's really nice that we have these versions. So if Azure is actually going to release a new AVM template, you can just call a newer version to have that new version of the AVM module available. I think that's really nice. First we set our name, and we are going to set a container app name, and we don't have that parameter yet, so we set it on pop-up over here. There we have it. And now our scope again, that's resource group, and our parents. And one of our parameters is the containers. And in our containers we need to set a container object. And as you can imagine, we are now going to set up one container, but it is possible, of course, that you set up multiple containers. In future episodes we will do that. For example, I have the idea of implementing Grafana next to our Boomi Atom container, and it's nice that they run next to each other. So we go for the docker.io container, but of course this can also be your own registry where you host your containers. So docker.io / Boomi / and what we actually say now is that we are going to, for example, get this one. So in our tags of our Atom, we are going for the regular Atom release. And maybe we'll look to my Bicep, it will be this. So it will be Boomi Atom release. And because I maybe want to switch in the future to a molecule, and I'm already running on containers, I like it to make this also a variable. So we can do that in Bicep. We're doing this. And this Atom release we are going to replace with Boomi Container version. And we are going to set it as a parameter. There we go. And next we are also need to have a name for our container. And I'm just going to call it container app name because I only need one now, but of course if you have multiple containers, set a unique one per container. And now we're going to set our resources, so how much CPU do we want to give to our container and how much memory. I'm going to give it one CPU because this is a demo and not too much of memory. And now we have to set our environment variables. And these are the variables when you go back to our Docker environment, which are also displayed over here. And we go all the way down, where is it? Here we have a list of all the possible environments, variables. So we have our env. And the first thing which we need is our install token. So we call it name install token. You have to use the exact name of the release of the Docker, so of the documentation. Otherwise, when this is released, the Boomi environment doesn't know which variable to take. And because this is an install token, we consider it a secret. So what we do, we do secrets ref, and we say, when we give it a name, so let's call it sig Boomi token. Let's copy that for a second, and then we go down a bit. We can set up our secrets, and here we are going to set our secure lists. Now I'm going to paste our secret Boomi token, and the value of our secret will be the Boomi. Let's make it a parameter, of course. Installer token. And set this again here. And now it's important that you say it's a secure parameter. I have to put that before it. There we go. And now when we deploy this, the actually token will not be visible in our log, so that is more secure. Okay. And next to the install token, you need to have a atom name, of course, which is visible in the Boomi Atmosphere. We call it Boomi Atom name. value is, in this case, a parameter which I set. So we can change it later per environment, like that. The next variable which we need is our Atom localhost ID. It can be the same as the Atom name, so I decide that I will use the same parameter as the Boomi Atom name. Localhost ID. And if you look to the Boomi documentation, they also say that you can just use the same one, and that it's most of the time recommended. The next one is name. And again, we go here for our Boomi Atom name. And the next one is our Boomi environment ID. This is not required, but I like after my deployment that my Atom is immediately connected to my environment. So we go for name, Boomi environment ID, and the value is Boomi environment ID, and we have to set that parameter. There we go. Put it down there. And if you go back to our post one environment, you can get a token by calling this API, and you can get all of your environments by calling our query API. I changed the expression that it just gets all environments, so you can actually get your, in this case, development ID over here. That's for later. Now we got our secure lists. So our container is now done. Oh wait, I have to place this in the wrong place. It should be there. There we go. And we need to set our environment resource ID. And it is the managed environment output resource ID. There we go. And we also need to have a name, of course, for our resource ID or for container app. And we could use our container app name again. Oh, we already had that, sorry. I did have it declared multiple times actually. That's rather strange. Let's continue. I see it. There we go. Oh, it is good again. I forgot the in this case, I don't allow any ingress traffic. We of course need this in the future. And we do allow outbound traffic, so we can actually perform calls to our API. But if we need, in the future, we need to enable our ingress target port. We are already going to set that. It will be 1990, because that's also used by Boomi as default. And we need to set our location, and that will be our location again. And we are again need to connect our storage with this container app. So it is mounted to the managed environment, but not to the container instance. So we have volumes. In volumes, we have to set an object with a name of, let's call it Boomi storage. We have set our storage type. Let's call it NFS Azure file. And we have to give the storage name. And we connect it to the managed services storage, so we have to use the same name. Storage name, and it was NFS storage Boomi. And that's it for that part. The only thing we now have to set the amount of replicas. So we say in this case, because we have Atom, we cannot scale out horizontally. So our minimum replicas is 1, but our max will also be 1. And of course, if you have a molecule, you maybe want to consider setting this to 3 and this to 10. But that's of course depending on your load and on your environment. So this is done. All these parameters I will now put into my parameter file, and I will be back with you shortly. So now we are going to do our deployment. And what we have done, we have set our parameters file. You can get this also from my GitHub. And our main parameter or main bicep file. And you have to use AZ login and select your subscription to give your terminal access to deploy stuff. And next thing we do is set our bicep deployment. So ASAP deployment on subscription level, and we are going to create something. We have to set a name for our deployment, and we set it as Boomi Atom deployment. We have to set a location. It will be West Europe for us, and our template file, which is main.bicep of course, and last our parameters. So parameters, which will be main.parameters.json. Of course, this will be def for you like this, and that should work if very good. Yeah. And this deployment will take about 5 minutes. So I will pause the video. Our deployment is finished. So yeah, let's check the results. So first of all, let's go to our Azure. So before there was nothing. And now we have a network resource group. We have a resource group which contains our Kubernetes configuration. I will focus on that on another episode a bit more, because Azure Container Apps is a simplified version of Azure Kubernetes. And here we have our Boomi demo resource group. And what we see, we have a container app, we have a log analytic workspace, we have our VNet, we have our Boomi dev environment, we have our storage account, and our private endpoint, and a network interface name. So what I want to show you, the resources from top to bottom as we deploy them. Over here we have our VNet, we have our address space which we assign to it, and of course we also created the two subnets. So we have our container app subnet name and container storage account subnet name, and you see we have them here. So we go back to our resource group. We are now going to into our storage account. And what you actually see when we go to our networking tab is that it is completely disabled, so it's completely internal. So no, it's not possible to reach the storage account from external sources, and that's why we needed the private endpoint. So it's really nice that it is now completely private, and we have our file shares over here, and we see that NFS is enabled, and this is our file share. We we go to our mission group back again, we have our container app environment. And in that container app environment, we have our apps, and one of those apps is our Boomi Demo Dev Container App. And that is this one. And this container app actually runs the Boomi Atom container. So here we have our environments, variables which we set up. We have our volume mounts. Oh, sorry. Here we have our volume for our Boomi environment. And when we go back to our Boomi Atom management, you see that something changed. And now we have a Atom up and running. And even because I already deployed an example process, you see it is automatically configured to be able to run on the new container app. So this is it. Thank you for watching. If you liked it, please subscribe or like my video, and I hope it helps you a little bit.